All right, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Welcome to Science Fiction and Fantasy Read Along, brought to you by Paperback Goldmine and Instagram Bookstore. I am Lewel Stamp. I'm the proprietor of both of those institutions. They're not institutions. And I'm happy to be joined by two of my very good friends. Please introduce yourselves, fellas.
Hey, this is Phil, DM Phil.
Hey, everybody. My name is Lewel.
Hey, Yule. Hey, Phil. Thanks for joining me today.
Of course.
Good times. All right. So in our last episode, we read chapter 4, which was called Whisper. In it, we followed Raven and Croaker on a special mission to hunt down and capture the enemy general Whisper. If you're new to the podcast, or if you haven't consumed the previous episodes, we recommend that you go back and start at the beginning. All of our episodes up till now are available on YouTube and wherever podcasts are available. In this episode, we're discussing Chapter 5, entitled Harden, in which the Black Company, through no fault of their own, is again forced to retreat another step closer to Charm and the Lady. Yule,
Yes.
can you please tell us the cast of characters for this chapter?
Sure thing. So with the Black Company, we have the captain, the lieutenant, Croaker, Raven, his charge, Darling, Elmo, Goblin, One-Eye, Silent, and a returning Jolly. All right, so for the enemies, we have the Circle of 18. The main one this time is Harden. We also have Moth, Seidel, Linger, and from far away, Parcel. And lastly, we have the 10 who were taken. In this chapter, we see Soulcatcher, the Hanged Man, who's also referred to as Crooked Neck, the Shapeshifter, Stormbringer, and from far away in the east, we have Whisper, Nightcrawler, Faceless, and Bone Gnasher. And also we have the Lady makes a brief appearance in this book in the form of a dream.
Thank you, Yule. All right, let's start with what do we stand to look at this week?
One of the things that about this chapter that really sticks out as far as like a theme or a concept is that it's kind of like a really dark time for the company. They are depressed, they're despondent, their morale is low, they're having a hard time coping with change and growth, and a lot of despair, maybe even bordering on like hopelessness and fatalism. There's going to be several examples in this chapter on that theme, and that's something we'll revisit as we go through the summary.
All right, so we begin this chapter. We're going to be keeping an eye out on, as Philip says, an overarching theme of despondency and despair. It's kind of ironic because we are watching the Black Company retreat closer and closer to Charm, which is the Lady's headquarters, essentially. It's where the Dark Tower is. And the closer we get, the deeper the despair, as it were. We enter the chapter in the Windy Country, and we're following Croaker as he's taking one step back at a time with a bow in his hand and an arrow nocked, ready to go. And there's a horrible, horrible storm that's beating on their backs. And as they walk backwards in a line, there are riders that are approaching and trying to attack them, essentially, to make them pay. And it's Harden's troops are harrying them the whole way. The storm is it's the child of Storm Chaser, and it is to allow the Black Company to retreat farther and farther away from Harden to cross the Windy Country. So the purpose of their retreat is twofold. One, they're trying to get to the Stair of Tears to get high ground and have a strategic advantage versus Harden's troops. And one of the reasons for that, obviously, is they're outnumbered. Croaker says that they are as large a company as he has ever witnessed. They're at 3,000 strong, but unfortunately, Harden's army is outnumbering their army 10 to 15 to 1, which puts their numbers horribly high at 30 to 45,000 versus their 3,000. So yeah, they're having to fight their way backwards with a huge wagon train through this horrible storm.
And the wounded.
Yeah, which are hopefully on the wagons, right? I hope they are. I really do hope that they are. As they're doing this retreat, at one point, a rider does approach Croker sees it coming out of the sandstorm, and he fires his arrow at it, and he definitely nails the dude, falls off his horse, and the horse runs away. And not too long after that, there's a hand on his shoulder. He's like, "Who was that?" And it's Raven, and Raven yells into his ear, "The captain wants you." Raven takes the bow and the arrows off of Croker, the arrows were all scavenged from the enemy, and he takes his place. So Croker heads towards the eye of the storm. Takes him a little while. He doesn't think he's going to find it, and then there it is all of a sudden. And there's the wagon train with all the wounded and 1,000 soldiers walking because it's not their turn on the line, essentially. And the captain dresses Croker down. He tells him, "You don't take a turn on the line. That's not your place. You're the only surgeon we have, and you are not to be risked on the line," essentially. Croker doesn't think that the captain understands that he's frustrated, that he can't really help the wounded anymore. He doesn't have the supplies. He doesn't have the time. There's too many wounded, and they don't have the means to help these people. And he doesn't think the captain really understands that he's out on the line to bloody the nose of Harden. But the captain gives lie to that thought and says, "Don't worry. When we get up the hill, we will bloody his nose. That will be the time. For right now, Croker, you're too valuable. You cannot be on the line." So Croker, he goes about, tending to the wounded, which is basically just praying for them at this point because there's not anything else he can do. Is there anything you guys think is important or worth adding to the first two sections of the chapter?
Yeah, Croker says that the glue that holds an army together, or a band of people together, is the ability to question orders. And that's what keeps them solidified. And then the captain says to Croker, "Oh yeah, well, you know what gets a company moving is on me coming up and kicking your ass, kicking the ass of philosophers like you." So he's kind of like saying, you can be all smart about this all you want, but it's you who's going to get kicked to get everybody else moving.
They are both correct, though. The underlings being able to bitch about the competency of the commanders and stuff is a very important aspect, but also the captain is responsible. And Croker is wrong to be on the line. He should know better, but he does. I mean, he's frustrated. He wants to fight back. Philip, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think if there's one thing I can add, it's just to emphasize the magnitude of the suck factor.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Lewel.
So this part of the chapter starts off with Croker overhearing a conversation. Elmo has come back to camp. He's talking with the captain. The captain is telling him that he wants to take his troops and go around and try and root out some of the bad guys.
There's a feint they're trying to flank the Black Company and get to the Stair of Tears first.
Right.
And he sends Elmo to go stop that from happening.
So as Elmo is going to stop that feint, the captain does let him know that he shouldn't expend too much energy, because what we want to do is come on back, set up camp, and what they're going to do is fake that and march in the night to the Stair of Tears, hoping that Harden would stay far behind as a result of thinking that they were going to settle in for the evening. We have Croker going and visiting the wizards that we normally visit, One-Eye, Goblin, and Silent. And he lets them know about the stuff that's going to be going on. Of course, that's not really great for them. They're not too happy. Actually, One-Eye's not very happy. But since Goblin doesn't like One-Eye, or at least likes to get under his skin, he's all for the brilliant plan. Elmo comes back to camp. There's a little stitching that has to happen. They start making it look they're setting up camp for the night, and then they take off. Stormbringer is creating a little bit of a storm, actually quite a big storm. And it's supposed to harry Harden, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
And prevent him from being able to catch up. And so in the middle of the night, if that should happen. So in the middle of the night, our guys go and they hit the Trail of Tears. It takes quite a few hours. They're doing all these switchbacks, and they finally make it. It's about an hour away when they notice that the stairs aren't actually a cliff. That's how big they are. Our guys get there. Croker looks out, and Harden is still making good time catching up with them. It almost feels like it's all for naught. He suspects that the reason why he is able to, gain on them so easily is out of rage. He says that, of course, he has rage. His brother-in-law was killed, and his sister was taken
Cousin.
by the lady. What was that?
Whispers his cousin.
Oh, cousin. Anyway, he's got relatives that he's upset about.
It's personal.
Personal, everybody.
That's right.
So that's how the chapter ends, or that part of the chapter ends.
Section.
All
right, Philip.
Yeah.
You're up.
The company finally makes it to the top of the stair of Tyr. They're exhausted. They have gone all day through a storm, then all night, then all day again. Then they cleared off the switchbacks because there had been an avalanche. And then they finally get to the top of the stair, and just as nightfall is happening. So mostly they just collapse. Croker does notice, and he does appreciate the fact that he's finally found a decent place out of the dry, hot, blowing winds. He said there's trees. He said that there's a nice little stream there. Pretty good place, I guess, to actually make camp and await Harden. Everybody just pretty much passes out and sleeps all night. Croker wakes up the next morning, and he is just sore and beaten and gritty and raw. But the captain already says, hey, get your hospital up and going. Time to get things moving. Time to start prepping. And everybody probably feels the same way. But Croker does notice there's other people in the company that are already grouchy and bitchy towards each other. And he said that's a good sign that they're already on the path of recovery because they're complaining. So as Croker is getting his hospital infirmary set up and taking care of the wounded, some reinforcements come. The lady has sent some reinforcements, and One Eye and Croker are watching them come in. He said there's about 1,000 of them, 500 of the lady's personal guard, and probably 500 Teamsters. And the Teamsters are bringing like food and supplies, medical supplies to help relieve the company. And they're kind of a sight for sore eyes. And when One Eye sees all this food, and he smiles, and Croker wants to write it in the annals because it's that a smile from One Eye is about as rare as hen's teeth. So he thought that was a worthy thing to actually put in. It's at this time that Croker gets to meet his doctors. The lady actually sent him some legitimate surgeons, some extra helpers, and a whole bunch of medical supplies. And it kind of gives Croker a little bit of hope, But most importantly, this is when the Hanged Man makes his appearance. He comes in with his team also. And Croker describes him like this. The Hanged Man, he was improbably tall and lean. His head was twisted over to one side. His neck was swollen and purple from the bite of a noose. His face was frozen into a bloated expression of one who had been strangled. And Croker expected that he had considerable difficulty speaking. It's right after this time period that Darling comes and talks to Croker. And she's like really, really excited. And she's talking with her sign language, and he has a hard time following it, but he's learning. He follows her back to wherever she had bivouacked. I don't know where that is. She shows him this wooden doll that had been like lovingly and intricately carved. And it's something that Raven had done for Darling, which shows he kind of has a heart. But Croker was amazed because he was thinking that, how did he find the time to do that with all the retreat and the war and the battles and everything else going on? Croker was kind of amazed, but he also realizes that Darling, even though she's not a little girl anymore, she's pretty much getting on to being a young woman. This is probably the most magnificent toy she's ever had in her life, considering where she came from in this tiny little village in some war-torn region. And so he's very happy that she is happy. And at this point, Raven comes back, and he grabs Croker on the shoulder and says, the captain wants to see you. Raven just completely pretends the doll is invisible and like he's too cool to notice that. And he feels like Croker, it's almost like he's embarrassed to show his soft side. And Croker kind of realizes he really enjoys acting like a tough guy. I mean, he is a tough guy, but he's definitely got a heart also. And he kind of pretends that he's not, but he obviously cares enormously for Darling. And I'm not sure why, because he's kind of a paradox between a heartless killer and I don't know if it's paternalistic or an older brother kind of syndrome and how he's kind of adopted darling. But there you go. Croker finally leaves. He goes, and I think he meets with his doctors, or he meets with the captain who tells him to get the hospital set up. And it's at this point that Croker kind of assesses the captain. He realizes that the responsibility was starting to get to him. He said he's never commanded so many men, nor faced conditions so adverse, with orders so impossible, staring at a future so uncertain. From where he stood, it looks like the Black Company was going to be sacrificed to buy time for the lady and the lady's primary troops. And it's certainly possible, and that kind of gets back to why people feel their time is done.
Well, it trickles down, right?
It does, yeah.
If the captain is under the impression that they're going to be sacrificed to buy time for the lady, his troops are going to reflect that.
Sure, absolutely. It's also at this time that kind of the military leaders start assessing what's going on, and none of them. The lady has personally put the captain in charge of all military forces, because he's probably the only guy he's the most successful captain over the entire campaign, and all of the regular army, the ladies' troops, and everyone else is really kind of chafing at the fact that they have to take orders from this southern mercenary captain. But orders are orders, and that's how it's going to get done. But while they're assessing the military strategy for holding off Harden, Croker acknowledges that the company are not enthusiastic fires, but the steer of Tyr could not be held by trickery. And that's kind of an important part, because one of the reasons why the Black Company is so successful is because they use intelligence, trickery, deceit, playing people against each other, getting the best bang for their buck when they do engage, and also their incredible discipline. And Croker notices that too, is that the regular army that they've adopted, 2,500 people that have joined the company, were also, despondent, demoralized, ready to leave, but the captain has been whipping them back into shape. Croker goes on at this time to emphasize the fact that even he thinks that he's done, the company's over. No one would be there to sing their songs, and no one would care in 1,000 years, and everything they'd ever done and believed in was going to be erased with time. It's kind of like bittersweet glory reminiscing about they're the last free company of Kadavar, whatever that is.
Yeah, he also says we are our only mourners, and it's the company against the world.
Yes.
After that.
Well, they are a mercenary company, so nobody's going to miss them.
Well, he also says that he's ready to retire.
Yeah.
And he's saying that's a one eye, and one eye's like, well, you know how we leave the company. It's either feet first or dead.
Yeah.
Well, Croker goes on to explain that whatever the company used to be, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, all of that is gone. He says the old intimacy is gone, and that's because they've gotten too many followers, and he doesn't even know what has happened. So he's gone days or weeks or even months without seeing some of them, and he's a little concerned about that because he doesn't know what their fate are, and it's kind of his job to record who they were and how they died and so on and so forth. He believes that kind of one of the only things keeping the army together and keeping the morale up is that they're attempting to regain that old intimacy. But it's kind of hard. You can't really force that with a bunch of guys you hardly know from another country, from another land,
who outnumber them greatly.
Yes, exactly.
So the company will become a different company if they keep those 2,500 new recruits.
This particular kind of section ends when Croker is on kind of a promontory, and he's looking down at the switchbacks and at the approaching army. And, he sees the stream kind of like go down the canyon, but kind of like disappear before it ever reaches the plains. But he sees Shifter at this time starting to sneak off down the switchbacks. And he knows what Shifter is doing. He's going to go infiltrate Harden's army, and he's going to, poison their food, foul their water, start picking them off one by one and ripping them apart and kind of demoralizing the enemy and preying upon their fears.
All right. So during the very beginning of the book, there was a moment when Croker was walking back to talk to the captain to get his dressing down, and a tumbleweed went by. he's kind of chuckling to himself that the enemy are going to peg that thing full of arrows because they know shapeshifters among them, or they suspect shapeshifters among them. So they're going to waste a lot of arrows when that thing goes and hits their front lines. Because he's a nasty piece of work, and obviously he can change shapes.
Is that what you think that meant? Because I did not understand that section.
Yes.
And huge tumbleweed comes blowing right at Croker, and it misses him. Yeah. And then it goes on towards Harden's army, and he laughs and says, "Oh, Shifter's going to have a great time."
Yeah.
And is the bush Shifter? But is it?
No, it wasn't Shifter, but he could enter their army that way. And they're aware of him and what he can do. So they're on edge, I think, is what he's getting at. That they'll pin cushion that bush and waste a bunch of arrows because they just don't know. That's how nervous they are about Shapeshifter, because he can literally be anything.
Which brings me to a point we had discussed earlier about Harden and Harden's army. Now, we haven't met Harden yet, and we don't really know anything about him. But the fact that he can drive his troops this hard for that long in pursuit of this enemy is just mind-boggling. I don't know if that's strength of personality, or they're afraid of him, or that the entire army, which is hard to believe, the entire army wants to wipe out the Black Company so bad they're willing to endure that much suffering.
Was it in this section that Croker described their army as hopped up on success?
He did, but even if you're successful after days and days of like facing a gritty hot wind and funnel clouds ripping you apart, it's got to be demoralizing. Like, how bad do you want to win?
Well, I think they can taste it. They know that they're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the tower at Charm.
Yeah,
they know that this army is about to get crushed. So that's got to help them in their morale, as it is damaging to the morale of the Black Company and their hangers-on. They're in opposite positions right now. And though the weather and the Taken are harrying Harden's army, 10 to 15 to 1, they outnumber their enemy. Yeah, they probably are also afraid of Harden, and they probably do want revenge, and they're hopped up on victory, and all of that stuff is contributing to the fact that they haven't broken yet. And
fair enough. But they also, I think they realize that if they wipe out this ragtag army, Black Company, and so on and so forth, there's pretty much little to nothing to stand in the way of them marching on Charm.
Oh, it's nothing. There's nothing. It's the Black Company and then Charm. That's it.
Yeah.
Scary, right?
Well, pretty scary for the Black Company.
Yeah, no wonder they're depressed.
Well, and they do know they're not in their element. This is going to be a straight up, I think the captain sees it as a straight up slog, and he's not going to be able to use his normal mischief, trickery, and recon, and tearing the enemy apart from within, that kind of stuff. It's going to be a slog, even though he's got a defensive advantage.
They have a very good defensive advantage, but besides that, yeah, it's going to be a straight up fight.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so that night they're playing Tonk and sitting around campfires and kind of just resting, because the next day is going to be a all-out war, and they know it. So they're taking a little bit of time to relax and get their heads straight, as it were. And Croker, he's won a little bit of money and he's done. He doesn't want to play anymore. So he goes and he lies down, leaning up against the log, and he's like watching the sky. Raven comes and sits down next to him, and Raven says, "Hey, did you seen the comet?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, that would be. It's about right. It would be coming back right now." So they kind of meander off a little bit away from the fire so they can see. And sure enough, in the distance, there's this little tiny arrowhead speck, and it's kind of pointing at the Tower of Charm in the distance. That comet is the harbinger of the fall of the lady, according to modern prophecies. And it was during the time when the comet was in the sky the last time that the Dominator and the lady and the 10 who were taken fell to the White Rose. So it's an important moment for the rebellion, and they're desperately seeking this White Rose who's supposedly been reborn. It's not a long scene. they decide, I think Raven decides, he says that Croker's whistling in the wind when he's trying to be optimistic about their odds of surviving and la-di-da. And then Raven says, yeah, well, you're whistling in the wind. I'm gonna go to bed. And Croker doesn't spend much time wasting time either. He goes ahead and he takes a little nap as well while he's sleeping. And he's not real sure if it was a dream or hallucination or what happened, but he felt fairly certain that he was visited in the night by like a golden light that tried to comfort him, said, "Fear not, my faithful. The stare of tears is not the lock of the empire. It can be broken without harm. Whatever happens, my faithful will remain safe. The stare is but a mile mark along the rebels' road to destruction." Now, that's what he dreams or thinks that he dreams, and there's really not much else to this section, but I want to ask you guys a question, and it's right after that little quote. Croker says that his wildest fantasies were being reflected back upon him during this dream. Now, do you think that what she's doing, because this is the lady, there's no real mistaking that. Croker wants to deny it, but the lady's coming to him in his dreams now and trying to comfort him and tell him, everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. But is she, what is it called when people grooming? Is she grooming him by reminding him of his sexual fantasies about her? Is that what that's about?
I don't know.
Wildest fantasies. She's reflecting his wildest fantasies back at him. She's reminding him of all of the things that he thought and fantasized about her. And then at the end, when it's all said and done, he gets a glimpse of the most beautiful female face he's ever seen. And then he can't remember it upon waking. I'm pretty sure that she's grooming him for something. And she's using, like you said last time, she's using his sexual desire of her and his own imagination to do it.
I think I have two thoughts on what I think is going on with the lady and Croker connection. I think there's one possibility. The one is that she wants to be remembered in a positive light. And she's being very friendly towards Croker because he's the analyst.
I think that's accurate. But what's, there's a big difference between friendly and salacious. And she's being salacious.
Maybe. I think she's giving him inspiration so that...
Wildest fantasies. He's not wildly fantasizing about, she's so cool, she's such a swell gal. No, he's imagining her naked. He's imagining her as a sexual being. I mean, you don't wildly fantasize about other stuff.
I do.
Oh, yeah? Like D&D?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is, you know what I'm talking about, and you're being obtuse.
Well, let's go back to my other theory, that somehow there is this cosmic connection between Croker and the lady, and I wouldn't go as far as to say love at first sight, but he had true fantasies, however misplaced, invented, or contrived, and when she read his mind, she picked up on that. And I think on some levels, everybody wants to be liked. And Croker had said that about Soulcatcher a couple of chapters ago. Ultimately, everybody wants to be liked. And she met Croker, and Croker honestly liked her, you know, and believed she was better than she was and had all these positive thoughts about her. And I think that she's still human, and that those thoughts fell on fertile ground because she has nobody. She's alone. And then you have this guy that honestly has good feelings for you. And I don't think that's something she would throw away willy-nilly. That is a rare and precious treasure that you cannot invent or create or buy or dominate. That's something freely given. And I think that's something she's connecting to, maybe just to maintain her own humanity. I don't know.
After the last chapter, when they went through a lot of effort to show us that she's not human at all.
Well, mostly no, but
murdered her sister at 14, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, she was not a nice little girl, let alone an adult woman. So I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see, basically. But he explicitly stated that, and that got me kind of wondering about how she and why she is grooming him the way that she is. I think you're correct about him being the analyst, and she wants to take advantage of that in some way. But she's using every piece of ammunition she has, and he's an easy target because of all of his fantasies. He has an active imagination, as has been repeatedly pointed out, and she's taking advantage of that. Well, okay, so when they wake up in the morning, it's fresh. Everybody's like getting ready. They're bathing. They're cleaning themselves. They're feeding. They're getting ready for war, basically. One Eye spots Goblin, who is fastidiously cleaning himself with a little bit of water. I don't know, it's like a bucket of water or something like that. And then One Eye makes that really clean, nice water not so clean and nice anymore. Isn't that right, Yule?
Yeah. Well,
oh, I'm sorry, Yule. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that last little bit? Because you did clear your throat at one point.
yeah, I did.
Yeah, please do.
So then when you're talking about the next morning, what happens is One Eye and Croaker have to get working in the hospital again. They're setting up the hospital, and it's him that tells Croaker about the dream. And he's like, you just have too much imagination. Too much imagination. And it's towards the end of their shift that he comes back and is cleaning himself. Goblin is cleaning himself. So what happens is, and of course, just like I am upset with my girlfriend when I'm up and I've done a whole bunch of stuff in the morning and she's just stirring, I'm going to be nasty to her, and that's what One Eye is to Goblin.
You're such a gentleman.
Sorry, Jill. So what happens is Goblin gets a big old face full of disgusting mud or something like that, and he turns his face into a giant frog's face, and he lets out the most disgusting, loud, bellowing croak, I guess is what it was. And with that, the battle is on. And so my section is a battle. Kind of think of a Sword in the Stone, the wizards battle between Merlin and that woman. I can't remember the witch. So shadows of snakes surround One Eye, and Goblin conjures 2 pint-sized ghosts that resemble One Eye. So it's just a big old wizard battle, and we have these. They take the snakes, and Croaker doesn't want to describe what happened to the snakes. I'm assuming they're doing something pretty sexual to the snakes, or I don't know what they're doing with them. So One Eye creates a giant dung beetles who start pushing the goblins towards the side of the cliff. Goblin changes those into trees and plants, and they root themselves in the ground, and they prevent themselves from being dug up. They transmogrify with plant mouths, and they start crunching up the beetles. And then the bugs dissipate into the air, and when they come back, it's giant hands that look like One Eyes, and it's described as being thorny, and they start uprooting the plants, and it's a big old scene that's going on, and as it's happening, everybody's loving it, and that's when Soulcatcher has a little conversation with Croaker.
Yeah, so while Goblin and One Eye are having this dueling match like they so often do, Soulcatcher sidles up next to Croaker. Croaker says it specifically that he didn't know who it was at first, but somebody sidled up to him in an intimate, comradely distance. So I guess that's literally right up next to him, and then Croaker looks over, and it's Soulcatcher. Soulcatcher's watching this wizard's duel take place, and she comments, she's like, they do have more talent than one would expect. But she says that it's so wasted on frivolity. And Croaker counters, and he says, I don't know. He says, this is the sorcery they can appreciate, unlike the oppressive, bitter wizardries of the Taken. And he didn't mean it to be bitter, biting, and caustic. He was just stating a fact. And Catcher whirls to him and looks at him, and Croaker kind of wonders if he's going to get beaten down by one of the Taken or something. And then she laughs, a little girlish giggle, and says, you're right. He's like, we're so filled with doom and gloom and brooding and terror that we infect whole armies. And one soon forgets the emotional panorama of life. And she's once again displaying her humanity.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah.
I want to interrupt you at this point because I want you to think about that sentence again. That last sentence that she said.
One soon forgets the emotional panorama of life.
Yeah, why would you do that?
Being above it.
What would cause you to forget the panorama of life?
Dead.
How about being
Immortal,
dead?
living forever would do that.
Or being immortal.
I'm still not convinced that they're alive. I'm also not convinced that they're dead.
I think there's something in between. I haven't decided, but I get the impression that yes, if you live forever, you just stop feeling stuff.
They certainly are beyond the normal everyday person.
Yes.
I just wanted to point that out before you went past it too far. Anyway,
all right, that's fine. That's fine.
Continue.
That's fine. Well, Croker acknowledges that she's showing her soft, sensitive, emotional side at that point. And so he wants to prod her and get her talking, but she kind of anticipates what he's doing. And instead of giving him a chance to ask any more questions, she just says flatly, "You had a visitation last night." And it was, again, stated matter-of-factly, not as a question.
Well, there's a question mark there.
Yes. It was in the form of a question, but it was really a statement, if you know what I mean. Croker admits, he said, "Yeah, I had a dream about the lady." And Catcher just chuckled. And she said, "I think she favors you, Croker. Some little thing about you has captured her imagination, just as she has caught yours." And then she asks, what did the lady have to say? Croker kind of dodges the question. They're having a normal conversation here, but something in the back of Croker's mind realizes that he's trading on very, very thin ice.
She's interrogating him.
There's always more.
Yes.
There's always more with the Taken, especially for Catcher.
Well, she's so smart. Don't forget how smart she is.
And possibly a mind reader.
Almost certainly able to read minds under certain circumstances.
Read body language.
Yeah.
So Croker even said this. He said, "Catcher's query was warm and offhand, yet there was a hidden intensity there which said that question was not at all casual." So he replied, just reassurances. And he said something about the stare of Tyr not being all that critical in her scheme, but it was only a dream. And Catcher says, "Of course, only a dream." But it was in the voice of the female voice that she always uses when she's very serious in business.
Her almost certainly real voice.
Yes, exactly. I agree. Her real voice.
She wears a pantsuit when she says it that way.
Well, it was at this time, Goblin and One Eye's battle has been still going on, and people are getting into it. That's when this other image shows up, I guess behind them, somewhere close to them, off of the cliff. I don't fully comprehend where it is, but it's close by. Oh, yeah, it says, "Over the cliff face, observing, floated a giant pink face, bearded, surrounded by a tangled orange beard. One eye was half closed, sleepily by a livid scar." And he said, "What's that?" And he recognized that it wasn't Goblins or One Eye, and he thought it might have been Silent getting involved just to kind of show them up and let them know that he was still the best. And Soulcatcher made a sound that sounded like a bird squawk, and she says, "Harden!" And that's when men start screaming in all directions, and you start hearing the horns going off in the background, and it's kind of on. And Harden sends forth he starts probing militarily. He starts probing the Black Company and the defenses, and never any serious attacks that amount to anything. But clearly, he's ready to kind of take the offensive.
Yeah, he described it as prodding the hornet's nest.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so Harden spends all day doing that, testing the waters, etc., and decides to engage at night. He's going to use exhaustion in his behavior, to his advantage, essentially. So there's a night attack on the stair, with troops trying to make it up through the switchbacks and etc. And we're getting a lot of information in this section about Moth and Seidel. Trinker's armies got defeated. Moth and Seidel are among the talking men here of the Plain of Fear. The East is looking bad for the rebel. All this kind of stuff. But as those armies are getting defeated, their generals are joining with Harden here. So his ranks are actually being bolstered while the black companies are dwindling. There are some auroras that start to appear. Croker's watching from the cliffside, essentially, and there are these like streamers of light that he's seeing that remind him of what an aurora might be. He's heard it described before, but he's never seen one. And then he remembers this pastel war. And he doesn't remember much detail, but he knows that the black company fought in it, and he's read about it before, and he remembers it was pretty horrible. So he runs off to tell Soulcatcher and the captain about it, and Soulcatcher assures him, don't worry, we brought the Hanged Man specifically for this purpose. The Hanged Man is going to neutralize the threat that you're seeing. It's not a big deal. Relax, chill. So we never really find out what that's about. We do find out that the analogy that Croker uses is that it takes a very skilled fencer to recognize what's going on in a fencing match. And he's likening the fencers to these wizards who, unless you're an expert wizard yourself, you're not really going to understand what's happening. But whatever it was that's happening, none of it affected the black company. It was just a pretty show of lights, and that was that. He goes back to his perch to watch what's going on. And then he can hear that there's troops down on the switchbacks. He can start to see little spots of red, cracks of red are appearing, and they don't show up right away. He doesn't notice it. It's very gradual, but it becomes obvious soon that the very ground down there is heating up. It's becoming hot enough to glow, and eventually some of it's catching on fire, and there's pools of lava, and there's screams from men down there. But all the while, Croker's thinking to himself, there's not enough screaming. There are not enough people on that pass. Harden's whole army, if they were there would be a lot more of a racket. And as he's watching, he feels some raindrops. And he thinks, uh-oh, and he runs. He bolts from the edge of the cliff face just as the downpour comes. And he said it almost knocked him to his knees. It was so heavy. And even though he ran, as soon as he felt the drops, he still got red skin and a little bit scorched from the steam. And then the screams from Harden's men, but he's certain at this point there's not nearly enough people on the stairs. Harden's army's not down there. And then they hear the trumpets from the distance. Somehow that army, the whole army, has flanked them.
All right, so Croker tells the scene after the initial attack. The Hanged Man is gone. Soulcatcher gets on his carpet and almost gets blown out of the sky. I guess that's where some magic is being done, because there's an explosion and the carpet violently veers, and then all of the light gets sucked up. You don't know what really happens to Soulcatcher because Croker's blinded for a moment. So these are like the things that are going on. This is an interesting part of the chapter. So everything's been really gloom and doom, but there is actually a lot of positive things that Croker says in this chapter. And I almost feel like he's actually gaining moments of acceptance and even somewhat pleasure about things that are going on. And a lot of it has to do with the captain. So example, he says he wasn't particularly startled or upset when he thought about all the work he was going to have to do at the hospital, fixing people. He says the early casualties beat me to the hospital, and he was pleased. And then he says he felt like he was doing good for some of the wounded, which is also a really good thing. Even still, Croker realizes that they are flanked. Even though they thought they were fortified, the rebels have been able to get around it by a feint. One Eye meets Croker in surgery, but even though they are working well with the ladies' recruits, they're getting overswarmed with a bunch of people coming in, wounded, I should say. Soulcatcher shows up in a looking very, very bad, and tells them they have to bug out. They got to get out of here right now. All right, so Croaker gets lippy, and he says things are going sour, aren't they? You got caught by surprise, didn't you? And Soulcatcher says, I'm doing the lady's bidding, which is very interesting. It's a way that Soulcatcher responds, not angrily and almost defensively, and then giving a big explanation of what's going on, about how we're winning, or the lady is winning on the east. We've got Whisper breaching the walls in the frost. Nightcrawler negotiated the treacherous menhirs on the plane of fear, and on and on and on. And there's a lot of characters that we're getting introduced to right here with Bone Gnasher and people that have committed suicide. And that's all good and everything as far as Croaker's concerned, but that's there and that's not here. And he's getting really, really upset about all this. So that's when Raven shows up, and there's a little bit of a conversation that's going on that Croaker is a part of, but doesn't really understand that it's being taken place. And what it is that Raven, along with Croaker, are going to go out and do a little bit of a job like they did with Whisper and the Limper in the last chapter. Croaker's not happy about this. He is bitching the whole way. And the lady is like, Soulcatcher is like, we're going to have everybody with us. We're going to have the Hanged Man, we're going to have Stormbringer, and we're going to have Shapeshifter. And I'm going to be there, and you and Raven are going to be there, and we're going to take care of this right now. And if you ain't with, and he turns around and goes straight to the carpet. Get on my carpet right now. And Raven and Croaker have to tie themselves up as they're expecting a real bumpy ride. And they go up in the carpet, and yeah, Raven has to tell Croaker, don't be an asshole. He's like, stop being an asshole. Get on this freaking carpet. And that's how, and he actually is really excited to get on the carpet. Some weird, anyway.
He gets to fly. He liked flying.
Yeah, he did like flying, even though it was really scary, obviously.
Well, this time especially, because she's not gentle this time. She just goes for it, and he almost falls off. They both would have fallen off if they hadn't been tied on.
Well, yeah, just one tiny section about that. When they go to recruit Raven, and he says, come on, Raven says, come on, Croaker. You want to be able to write down in the annals that you took down more of the Circle of 18 than any of the Taken. He says, what am I, a bounty hunter? No, I'm a physician.
I'm a doctor, damn it.
Oh, that was like, it's so Star Trek. I'm a bricklayer.
Yeah, there's also a part where, Soulcatcher is trying to say, hey, come on, let's go do this thing. You're the only people that we can get to do it. And Raven's like kind of sells out Croaker and is like, hey, this guy had to be told by the captain to get off the line. This guy doesn't want to be a physician. He's like, oh my God, I gotta go be a doctor. I got all these wounded I have to take care of. Blah, 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 blah. And that's when Raven sells him out. And Raven's stuck having to do this. He's like, you're coming with me too.
All right, but you remember how the captain said, you don't take a turn on the line, Croaker.
Yeah, this is a...
You think the captain is happy about this? I guarantee you he's not. This is his only surgeon is being voluntold to go kill one of the Circle of 18.
Although we have seen the ladies' people that they brought in, he has been able to get them under control, and things are working well within the camp. So, and then don't forget, Soulcatcher says the lady's taken with you, and if you do her a favor, it's going to look really good in your resume.
Yeah, that's fine, but they're not part of the Black Company. Croaker is. Croaker's the only surgeon in the Black Company. I guarantee you the captain wants nothing to do with this mission for Croaker. Guaranteed.
Oh, well.
All right, so let's talk about that moment when Soulcatcher tells Croaker that there is no choice. She's using the voice of a child.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
The lady chose you, and she uses a kid's voice to do it.
Yeah.
Croaker complains, but he knows he needs to do this. And so he and Raven get strapped onto this this, I like to think of it as a bed frame. I don't know what to look at it, but it's called a flying carpet on a bed. Either way, it's very hard. So they get on, they strap themselves in, and they haul ass. And my interpretation here is they get like really, really, really high. And I think Croker asked, like, where's the Hanged Man and where's Stormcatcher? And Soulcatcher kind of like points off in the distance, and Croker can see like a little bitty speck way over to his right and can see another little bitty speck way over to his left. And it implies that is Stormbringer and the Hangman basically doing a similar kind of a holding pattern and for a while. And then all of a sudden Catcher says, it's go time. And she said, hold on. And they just drop like a rock and then start flying down towards some location. And like all three of the Taken are like dropping and like triangulating on this one location. And they're hauling tail over there, and they start swarming back and forth through the canyons and staying low. And then they slow down and they come to a spot, and Catcher like looks around, and you see that this is their target. It's Harden. It's Harden specifically. And on some signal, they all rush in there, and they see that Harden's not alone. Harden has like 20 Teamsters with him, and I don't know why that's important, but she like zooms in, drops the flying carpet, and she said, go, 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 go. And Raven and Croker jump off, and they grab their swords, and they're all like weak-kneed and scrambling, and Catcher whips out her sword. She charges, and at the same time, Stormbringer comes in, and she's got two of her best soldiers with her, and the Hangman also does that, and he's got a flying carpet, and he's got two guys on there, and they both jump off, and we all swarm towards Harden, and the Teamsters get in the way and start slowing him down. Meanwhile, Harden rows over to this horse, and he climbs on board the horse, and he's trying to make a getaway. And Croker remarks at how like big and intimidating and powerful Harden looks, as in like superhuman in size. And he says the horse also is like super in size. And meanwhile, they're trying to get to Harden as fast as they can before he can make an escape and get away. And Soulcatcher is like leading it, and she's just like wades into these Teamsters, swinging her sword, and like she is very, very small. And Croker describes it as like the gore flying in all directions. And she takes out her anger on these Teamsters. She said, "Why the hell were you here? Harden was supposed to be alone." I don't know why she said that. Was she just angry because they're in her way and they don't want Harden to get away? Or is she just feel bad that she has to kill them?
Right. You recall that they're already incapacitated, right? Croker said that he didn't know what the Hanged Man did to them, but they were all choking and gasping and clawing at their throats. And the only one that had gotten out of it was Harden. He shrugged off the magic and jumped on the horse.
That's right. So these guys that's right. I forgot about this.
They're incapacitated, and she is slaughtering them as she just walks through.
Wow. Yeah, right.
When I kill people, I want to make sure that they know that they're stupid for being in my way. The classic way to go.
Okay.
Well, there was a moment earlier when there was some telepathy going on between the Hanged Man and Soulcatcher. And then they had a signal that triggered all three of them to come in and swoop down on Harden at the same time. So somehow their information was bad. However they got their information, there were Teamsters present. So either somebody gave them information and said Harden's alone, or neglected to mention the Teamsters, or just didn't consider them as even there because they're just people.
Maybe the latter. Didn't even really consider them as worthy enough to mention, since Harden is the target and they're just normal men, pretty much incapable of defending themselves against the Taken.
They're just Teamsters. Not even soldiers.
Yeah, exactly. Not even soldiers, they're Teamsters. You're right. I think you're right. I think Soulcatcher just waded in and killed them all because she was annoyed at their presence. Or maybe because she's such a control freak, she's just upset that she had bad information that she wasn't counting on.
I think it's that latter part. And I think, well, why don't you go ahead and continue? I think we can determine who gave her that information in just a moment.
Okay, so the Taken and their duo of soldiers that support each of them plow through these Teamsters. They all rush towards Harden, and Harden's on his horse right now, and he's like uses some magic, and like all the Taken just get completely like paralyzed. They get covered with this like scarlet glowing globe or something like that, and then they can't move or do anything. And so really, it's these Raven and it's Croaker and it's these four of the soldiers like rushing towards Harden as fast as they can. And Harden pulls out this like massive sword and like cuts down two of them without even thinking. He tries to move towards the Taken because he's like, they're incapacitated. I'm going to kill them right now. But his horse won't obey him. His horse just like barely starts walking. And he's like really, really upset at this horse. And so he gets his free hand and he slaps the horse on the neck as hard as he can to try to get it moving. And he slaps it on the mane. And when he does that, the mane just like wraps around his hand. So he can't move it. And then he can't cast spells. And that's when the troops get all over him. And he gets really, really angry and he throws his sword at one of the Taken, and he throws it at the Hanged Man, and it like hits him right in the head and like sticks. And then Raven comes up right on top of Harden, and he tries to hit him, and he does succeed in hitting him, but it doesn't hurt him at all because he's wearing chainmail or something like that. And Harden responds by like hitting him right in the temple with his hand and like dropping him like a rock. And Croaker is right behind him, and he changes tactics, knowing that he can't really hurt Harden through his armor. So he slashes at his hand and he cuts it. And he said like bone and blood like spurt everywhere. The other two soldiers are on him and they start hacking. And eventually they take him down. And Croaker, unfortunately, he just kind of like backs off and dreaming for some reason that I can't comprehend. And he lets these other two soldiers take him down. After they kill Harden, then the Taken kind of get released from their spell.
Yeah, hold on. Yule's got you.
He cuts the hand, you're right. The horse, the mane was grabbing his hand, but he tried to like cut the horse's throat and realized he couldn't do it. And then he chucked his sword, and when Croaker fell back, he was giggling. And he was kind of like mad because I think he got messed up pretty bad also. And he's giggling because he's seeing that the horse is shifting and changing shapes into shapeshifter. And that's when everybody starts swarming on Harden afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. And they actually say that Shifter grabbed a hold of Harden and was holding him while these other two soldiers were finishing him off.
Yeah.
He was riding on his shoulders.
We thought he was poisoning their water. And he was pretending to be a freaking horse.
Yeah, Croaker was basically had a moment of insanity because Shifter was being ridden by Harden. It must have just kind of blown his little mind.
And they said Shifter was like giggling and all impressed with himself, like he had single-handedly taken down Harden, or he played like the greatest joke ever.
It is a pretty good joke.
So thank you for mentioning that and clarifying that. Yeah, that's how it happened. But then all said and done, Shifter realizes that the Hanged Man is like just got his head caved in with this massive sword. And Shifter and Soulcatcher are already there, and they're just like staring at him and watching him die.
You meant Stormbringer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Stormbringer and Soulcatcher. And the Hanged Man, despite having a sword in his head, like pulls it out and he's trying to say something. Stormbringer and Soulcatcher don't do anything. They just let him start dwindling. And Shifter finally sees this, and Shifter like shivers with anger and like rushes over there, shambles over there as fast as he can, because if you remember from an earlier chapter, Shifter can heal. Do you remember that? When he healed Raven at one time?
Yep.
So we think that's what he's going to do, but Soulcatcher and Stormbringer like get in his way and just like stare him down. And they have this stare down fight. And who knows what they're really going on in their heads. They're just going to let him die. And they don't want Shifter to get in the way. And we have no idea what's going on or why she's doing this, but they are. And in fact, they're having kind of this mental discussion on what's up. And that's when Stormbringer's elite soldiers come in behind Shifter and get ready to jump him. Shifter essentially just stands down and says, okay. I mean, he's probably not going to fight and maybe die for the Hanged Man, but clearly he wanted to save him, which I think is kind of strange in itself that he would go through such effort and have that much care to want to save it. Maybe it was duty. Maybe it was friendship. Maybe it was just tactics that you keep somebody you can know and more or less trust to do their job. Whatever it is, he lets Soulcatcher and Stormbringer have their way. And Stormbringer looks at Soulcatcher and nods her head, and then Soulcatcher changes. In Soulcatcher world, the slits of her mask blazed lava red, and suddenly there was no catcher. There was a cloud of darkness 10 feet high and a dozen across, black as the inside of a coal sack, thicker than the densest fog. The cloud jumped quicker than an adder strike. There was one mouse-like squeak of surprise, then a sinister, enduring silence. After all the roar and clangor, the quiet was deadly ominous. Croaker knows what's up. Things are not good for him. So he shook Raven, who's barely coherent, and tries to get him up and moving. The dust cloud vanished as quickly as it appeared. Soulcatcher stood between the soldiers, and then both toppled slowly with the majesty of stately old pings. And then...
Pines.
Oh, pines. That makes more sense. Soulcatcher reassumes her shape, and she goes over to Croaker and like stares at him, and he realizes like he's pretty much the only living witness to what has occurred here, essentially the murder of a Taken.
There's no pretty much.
Yeah, all three of them surround him, actually.
He is the only one alive.
They're starting to close in on him.
Mm-hmm. And he stared back and he said, "Brave Croaker, guts enough at least to stare death in the eye." And then Soulcatcher apparently changes her mind, and she says, in a voice of one of the soldiers she just took, she says, "You didn't see a thing, did you?" So now we know how she captures souls. And apparently she's going to let him live. And we can talk about why she's let him live, because I don't fully comprehend it. It makes no sense other than she's the favorite of the lady.
He is.
Let's finish the chapter and then let's talk about it.
All right, fair enough. So basically after that ensues, they get up on their flying carpets and they take off. They go back to main camp. Croaker's convinced he's going to get killed. He hasn't, just because they let him live for the minute. I mean, she could easily just dump him off of a carpet, and that's how he dies. But whatever, they go back to camp. Done.
You mentioned this yesterday when we were talking, and you just skipped it completely here.
Well, you just told me to skip it.
No. I told you to end the chapter. I don't want you dwelling on why this or that happened.
All right.
Oh, yeah. So as they're flying away, Croaker is like looking into the canyon and kind of seeing the carnage. And in the shadow of a sandstone tower, he sees this golden nebula that moves, which I take to mean that's the lady.
I think he took that too because he said his heart stopped.
Yep, exactly. And in some capacity, she's right there. She's watching. She's keeping an eye on things. And I don't know if the Taken noticed, but he noticed. And maybe he's the only one that was supposed to notice.
So it turns out that all they're doing at this point is retreating. When they get back to camp, that's what they're doing. They've got to go. It's time. Harden's army's overwhelming them. If they had just a few more men or a few more hours or the help of the Taken, maybe they could have really, really done some damage to Harden's army, but they're beat, they're exhausted, they're wiped, and the Taken are not helping for whatever reason. So they withdraw for the last time, and the only place for them to go is to Charm. And that is where the chapter ends.
Well, it sort of ends. There is one important thing I want to mention. This, they are retreating, withdrawing, moving in on Charm, whatever you want to call it. And that's when Croaker says a couple of things. One, he's talking about the countryside. He talks about as the lush, green, fertile fields outside of Charm. And it's kind of, I always had it kind of in my mind that the lands of evil are this blasted and gray and diseased, but they're not. I mean, she has to feed her arms with something, and apparently it's really awesome place to live outside of tyranny and oppression. But it sounds like it's a good place to be a farmer. He also says that one more eventful thing happened while they were moving in on Charm, and that's the lady came to him again. Or he called it a dream, but really he knows it's not a dream. And do you remember what she said at that time?
Faithful, reward. It's been a litany of the same stuff 3 times.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, it says, Yeah, my faithful need have no fear. But the point is, she made an effort to to visit him again 3 times, 1 chapter. Awesome.
She was like a vampire or something.
But she's hot.
Dracula.
Well, she portrays herself as hot. She may not be that hot.
It's true. She may be like 900 years old and look it.
She could be Instagram hot,
The filter.
The filter, exactly.
Yeah, black and white filters are good.
Well, anything to make the average looking woman pretty is okay in my book.
I'm trying to make myself look pretty. What are you talking about?
You're succeeding in every way. All right, so they started off retreating. They had a series of engagements of varying importance and destructive nature, and then they're retreating again. Like, this whole chapter is just them getting their noses bloodied and having to run away. However, they succeeded in the ladies' goals, which was to take out surgically several of their generals. And that seems to be all that the lady really cares about. She's one by one picking off their generals without any real regard for the armies. However, she does seem to be favoring the Black Company. She's bolstering their strength. When she's talking to Croker and she's telling him that her faithful shall be rewarded, she's not talking about Croker. She's talking about the Black Company.
Is she?
Yeah, dude. Croker's not unique among them. He's the analyst, and he's got this fascination with her. But
I thought the lady was
my faithful. That's plural, buddy.
Well, I don't disagree there, but it could just be anybody that is her follower.
Well, if you think that, don't you think that it would also be like that the Black Company would take a lot bigger of a beating? None of the Black Company takes a beating. Like, it seems to me like they're kind of blessed right now.
Well, they're allowed to take control. They, geez, Croker and Raven are put into like really important situations all the time.
Right.
But
we can
still
say that's for the sake of story, really. But the fact of the matter is, the lady has elevated the captain higher than anybody else in her army other than the Taken. And she did that from pretty much the get-go, right? We talked a long time ago about the lady actually wanted the Black Company all along. Like, we've been suspicious of this since chapter 2 or 1 or something.
Right.
If she wants the Black Company, she's not going to sacrifice them if she can help it, right? And she seems to have, she sent them 1,000 troops or 500 troops and 500 teamsters loaded with provisions. If she didn't care what became of them, no, she would just let them die on the straits. She doesn't care.
They're the only ones that are doing anything worthwhile as far as she's concerned. They're the only ones winning their skirmishes or their campaigns.
I agree completely, but I think that she's referring to the Black Company as a whole.
Uh-huh.
They are the faithful. They are the ones that serve her without question, right?
Well, they serve Soulcatcher, right?
Indirectly, they serve her.
Well, let's get back to what her motivations are. And I think you are correct that really she doesn't care about the battles. In fact, she said every time the rebel won a battle, she ripped out their heart for it. Yes. She took out their soldiers. And if you think about that, and that's, I think we didn't mention it earlier, but when Soulcatcher and Croker were debating over how bad things looked, Soulcatcher said, actually, we've accomplished every single one of our objectives except one. Harden. Yeah, and the one she meant was Harden, and they got that. So that means, essentially, regardless of what the Black Company is doing or how successful they are, that the objectives all along were to remove the Circle of 18 one by one. Okay, so I'd like to go back to that moment when you said at the very beginning that the theme of the chapter was this kind of bleak despondency, right? Yeah. Do you think that is Glen Cook trying to show us what it's like to be a soldier and not really understand what the generals are doing? Maybe. Because he was a grunt. He was not an officer. He was an enlisted man in the Navy.
And when Croker said it early on, it's the right and the privilege of the underlings to question the the intelligence and the capacities and the brains essentially of the generals, the commanders. It's their, and that's what they're doing the whole chapter. That's what Croker's doing the entire time. He's like, well, they surprised you, didn't they, huh, Soulcatcher? I was like, well, yeah, but we're doing exactly what the lady wants, and the lady's getting exactly what she wants.
Yeah, and she doesn't include the grunts on her plans,
but she does include Croker. She does tell Croker, don't worry, you're freaking out just a little bit. Relax. It's me. I'm the king commander here, and I'm telling you personally, unequivocally, that everything's fine.
Well, that's why I kind of want to go back to my theory that the reason why she's including Croker so personally is she wants him to witness these things.
He's an analyst.
Well, exactly. He's not a soldier, right? I mean, he can be a soldier, but on par with the rest of the Black Company, he's not really a soldier. And he admitted that. He's admitted that multiple times.
Yeah, he said it was incidental. Him fighting was incidental.
Right. And he got chosen to take out Whisper and the Limper, which would seem out of place, but obviously she wanted him there either because she wanted to meet him or two, she wanted him to witness and record it.
I think it's that latter. I really do. I think that she's using him to create the history for her now.
Yeah, and she did it again when she wanted to get Harden, because clearly they're better, much better soldiers than Croker, who could have performed that, but she wanted him to see it.
Obviously, because he failed. In that moment, he freaked out. Like the other soldiers who were way more used to the Taken and their abilities did not freak out. They succeeded in chopping Harden to pieces, where Croker had a moment of insanity when he saw Shapeshifter in action.
Yes, exactly my point.
Yeah, they're definitely better soldiers. But he witnessed it, and that was the purpose, I think, for sure.
So
let's talk about that information. The misinformation that made Soulcatcher so mad. When she showed up and there were Teamsters there.
Yeah.
She's freaking out. She's like, "What are you doing here? He's supposed to be alone," and all that.
Oh, well, no, it doesn't make sense. I was going to say she doesn't want any witnesses there, but I don't know why she would care if her only goal was Harden.
All right. Well, not okay. So
No.
Not too.
Well,
What now?
No. I'm sorry. Continue.
Not too far before they got there, there was a moment when the Hanged Man, Glen Cook describes it as the Hanged Man was in the posture of man listening, something like that. That was the wording.
Yeah, like he cocked his head up to as if he was listening for something.
And he was listening to either Soulcatcher or Stormbringer. They were conversing telepathically.
Yes.
And we know that they were able to use telepathy to communicate the go signal and etc. And then we have once they're down on the ground and she's furious because her information was bad or whatever. I'm wondering if it wasn't the person that was down there that should have been giving them that information and telling them that now was the time. That could only have been Shapeshifter.
Yes, because they needed to know location and condition and everything else. And the only person capable of doing that was Shapeshifter, right?
The man on the spot.
Right.
Funny guy.
So did he omit it because it wasn't important? Did they come in after? Or did he intentionally not tell them?
I think he didn't think it was important enough to mention.
Yeah, but she's a details woman. She's a details girl.
She is a details woman. I think also that this is a way for Glen. Okay, so Croker tells Elmo earlier in the chapter, "Hey, we need to start distancing ourselves from Soulcatcher," right?
That was at the end, at the retreat to Charm.
Yeah, at the very end.
Yes, it was. So these I'm wondering if like that is Glenn Cook is showing us these things about Soulcatcher, right? He showed us how she takes souls. She used a child's voice to talk to Croker, indicating that she had killed children in the past. There are these little hints. And now, and the interrogation that she performed on Croker after the first visitation by the lady, where he knew something was up, but he didn't know what it was. And he hoped that he could get away with just saying, oh, I had a dream. It was crazy. And she kind of bought it. He thinks she bought it, but she's smarter than he is by far. So maybe she didn't buy it. But he's getting nervous. And there's all these little details throughout this chapter suggesting that maybe they want to do just as Croker's saying, start creating a distance. And I think this is, you know how people can put up a guise of friendliness for a little while, but eventually they get tired of it. You know, it's like that new guy at work. He shows up, he interviews really well, he's real friendly to everybody, but over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, his real personality starts to show through. And you're like, man, this guy's kind of a jerk. You know, he's charming at first, but remember how smart she is. Just remember that, because if she's that good at reading people, she's probably that good at disguising her own motivations. And she can probably come off any way she wants to. And I think now we're starting to see Soulcatcher really.
Yes, and her interrogation of Croker, because she was worried on some level about what the lady talked to him about.
Right.
She doesn't know. Somehow she does not know, either because she actually cannot read minds or she just wanted to test him.
Do you think she can read the lady's mind?
I don't think she can read the lady's mind.
I don't think she would dare, but I bet she could.
Interesting. Well, the point is, I think that is the first hint that either she's jealous or envious or concerned that the lady is communicating directly with Croker. I mean, who is Croker, right?
Yeah.
Croker's just a doctor.
Yep.
And the lady's communicating with him directly, and Soulcatcher obviously does not like that. And like I said, it could be jealousy, could be envy, could be maybe she's offended, maybe it's ego, maybe she's concerned that something is up.
Do you remember that she described herself as the second most powerful woman in the world?
Yes, I remember. Right after she found somebody else's true name, which we don't know who that was.
We don't, but I have a couple of sneaking suspicions about whose name she didn't find. One of them being the Hanged Man. I bet you she didn't know the Hanged Man's name. But okay, so we'll come back to that. If she's the second most powerful woman in the world, she thinks she's the second most powerful woman in the world. Doesn't that suggest to you that her only rival is the lady?
Sounds like it.
Okay, so if she views the lady as a rival, then anything that she doesn't know that the lady is saying, any information she doesn't have, is risky. She wants it all. She wants to know everything because she views the lady as a rival.
Or she's worried that the lady might try to snuff her out.
Yeah, well, if she thinks she's a lady's rival, the lady may very well think she's a rival.
Yes.
So yeah, there's definitely a possibility there.
So let's move that forward to why they allowed the Hangman to die, because I think they could have saved him, right?
Definitely could have saved him. Definitely could have. I'm pretty sure that when they found those 3 true names, the Hanged Man's name was not among them.
Why?
Because she let him die.
Oh, and if she valued that nugget of powerful treasure.
Basically, the name means she can control that person.
Right. And if she could control it.
You don't let somebody die that you can control.
Yes, I agree with you now. I see your logic. Yeah, you're right.
So she doesn't have his name. So when he was, we discussed this yesterday when I was at your house, the difference between evil and good, right? Somebody's dying on the street and you're like, I'm just going to have a moment of evil and let that happen. Well, she wouldn't be motivated to save the guy because it's just a perfect opportunity. It's not her killing him. She didn't have to lift a finger. She just has to let him die, And then one of her rivals is gone. One of the people loyal to the lady and controlled by the lady is gone. So she just strengthened her position as the second most powerful woman in the world by a pretty sizable percentage.
By denying the lady a powerful asset.
Yes. Yes. I have nothing else to say on that point. I mean, as far as that goes, I think I'm out of information that can get me anywhere logically.
Yeah, but Stormbringer was in agreement, which suggests maybe Stormbringer is the other person whose name she knows.
I don't think we can infer that simply because Stormbringer's not the one that got the sword to her head. You know? We just don't know. All right. So what else do we have, guys?
Well, there's an opening in the ranks of the Taken.
That's true, huh? Oh, yeah, but the lady saw the whole thing happen.
Well, we assume, yeah.
I think that's pretty, yeah, there is an opening, though. You're correct. I wonder who it's going to be. It's not going to be Harden. He got chopped to pieces.
Yeah.
So can we methodically go through the list of the circle of 18 that died this chapter? It was like a lot.
Yeah.
Let's do all the deaths, but yeah, definitely start with them.
So we have Harden died, Moth, Linger, and I guess Parcel committed suicide in another place. There was a character named Seidel who was injured, but I don't know if there was a confirmation on death there.
There was no confirmation.
They lost Whisper, and they lost, who was before Whisper?
Raider.
Thank you.
Raker.
And Trinket.
Okay. So they've lost a lot of their number, a lot of their 18.
So what would that put them down to?
Well, 2.
Assume that one of them is grievously injured and will come back.
It sounds like they lost about 8, so they might be down to 10. I could have.
You think they're re-upping their numbers?
I don't know anything about that. I need to read their analyst stuff.
Oh, what was the guy that committed suicide?
Its name was Parcel.
Oh, yep, that's it. Yeah.
And that army was surrounded and being sieged instead of being captured by Bone Gnasher?
Yeah, Bone Gnasher. Yeah. Someone we haven't seen either.
Did we lose anybody in the Black Company?
No, nobody lost.
Okay, no named characters anyway. They certainly suffered casualties this time around.
Yeah, well, they had a lot.
Okay, Darling. Darling's doll. Raven made this doll for Darling. And it's a beautiful doll. He's probably very good at carving, and she is enraptured with this doll. And he's busy making a wardrobe for it for later. He's not done, It's like the job isn't over. He's made the doll, but right now it has no clothing.
He's going to do a Malibu Stacy and everything.
Yeah, she loves this thing. So there's also a moment when they're talking about the hand signals, her sign language, Darling's sign language, and how Croker has been learning it, and the captain is like talking about making everybody learn it because it's more efficient than what they're already using. And he said that Darling likes to teach the sign language because it makes her feel useful and valuable. And then on page 231, it says, care for Darling fell my way by default. This is because Raven had a concussion. He was kind of out of control for 2 or 3 days. Out of commission, I mean. The child was a fine distraction from the depression of yet another retreat. Maybe that was the way she was rewarded. She had rewarded Raven for his generosity. So it's not like she's actually rewarding him, but there may be, like, Croker speculating that Raven values her for that reason.
She gives him a purpose other than just killing things.
Right. And last chapter, we discussed that Raven had no purpose anymore. He'd achieved his whole solitary purpose, which was to exact revenge. Right?
Yeah, the only enjoyment he got was with Darling.
Yes. This is a reason for him to live, is the care of this young girl. And then when that duty fell to Croker, he felt the same way, that Yeah, they're retreating, but this is a reminder of real life. This is a reminder of life outside of the Black Company. That
It's like a rose growing in a city,
okay,
a flower on a concrete sidewalk.
sure.
And that's what she kind of is. There's these hardened guys that are in the worst situation they've ever been in. That's possibly going to be the death of the company. And no one's going to ever care about them ever in the future.
Right.
Or ever know about them ever again. But, here's this little girl that, they kind of take care of. And, she brings a little bit of enjoyment and, innocence that they don't have anymore.
Yeah, there's definite reciprocity there.
Yeah.
Definite.
I guess that's why people want kids.
Silly people. All right. So I'd suggested already that Soulcatcher does not like the Hanged Man and that she called him Crooked Neck and all that kind of stuff. I don't think there's anything else there other than we also watched her let him die. Right? We don't know enough about that to. Okay, so let's talk about why they didn't kill Croker at the end there.
He's connected.
Well, he's the lady's
exactly.
favorite.
He's the right hand man now. He's the new dominator.
No. He's the dominated.
Yeah, well,
I have a theory.
She's freaky.
Go on.
I have a theory.
I know. Go on.
So, is it possible that the lady, because Croker is not a wizard, she uses him, she sees through his eyes, like clairvoyance? Is it possible that that's his part? Because she keeps insisting that he does these dangerous things. Is it possible that she's essentially seeing through his eyes what happens?
Except that she was already there anyway, right?
But maybe she couldn't get close without being detected. Remember that?
That's a possibility too. Yeah.
Remember how the limper said when Soulcatcher was going after the limper, she said, "If I get any closer, the limper will sense me."
That's true.
I think it's something that we need to keep track of. It's a good question, and I don't know the answer. I don't know if there's enough information for me to form an opinion one way or another. What I do know is the next chapter is called The Lady. So I have a feeling we're going to learn quite a bit about her next time or next chapter.
Yeah, well, one would hope, right?
Yeah, yes, one would hope.
Of course, just about everybody that has a chapter name ends up dying.
Well, hold on. Raven. No, so far it's 50%.
All right. Or getting taken.
Yeah. Whisper got taken. Harden got killed. Raven's alive and kicking. The Raker died, and then the first chapter was the Legate.
Yeah.
And that's Soulcatcher.
Yeah.
Who's just fine. Doing just fine.
Sure.
All right.
Well, now, really, the question is the Hanged Man just somebody that irritated Stormbringer and Soulcatcher, and they just don't like that person? Or is this another person that they had a beef with or was getting in their way for something else? Are they making moves?
I mean, I had a feeling because of that derogatory terminology that they didn't like him from past experience. But we also know that Shapeshifter did like him from past experience. He wanted to heal the guy. And it wasn't like with Raven when he was reluctant to heal. He wanted to go over there and stop him from dying. So this was an ally, somebody he valued. But he could not take the other two. And he knew it. I assume that's what that was about.
All right.
But okay, so do you remember when Croker's the last one alive, Soulcatcher's just taken the souls of those two soldiers and they topple over like grandfather pine trees and they're all staring at Croker and he's sitting there, he gouges Raven, he's trying to wake him up because he's like, please help me, get up, please help me, you know? But Raven's got a concussion. He opens his eyes and his pupils are dilated and he's like, oh, son of a concussion. No help there, you know? Like, you didn't see a thing, Croker. So creepy. He knew he was dying right then and there, like this was twice this has happened to him where he thought he was going to go off into the bushes and get killed by one of the Taken. And it's the second time it hasn't happened. Like, he has every reason to believe that he's going to get killed by Soulcatcher at this point. So his warning to Elmo to tell the captain, we need to start distancing ourselves from Soulcatcher might be self-preservation as well, because he is the only witness to that collusion against the lady.
Well, you had previously, outside of this podcast, mentioned a theory that the reason Croker wants to distance himself from her is because he thinks she's up to some sort of power play, and he doesn't want the black company to get squashed or be involved in it.
Right. Definitely a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. I mean, without knowing.
But again, why did she let Croker live?
Well, are you talking about right now?
Yeah.
Soulcatcher knows that the dreams that Croker's been having, and if they were just a dispatch of Croker, have we witnessed one of the Taken kill somebody? I mean,
yes.
I know that like they had all that stuff going on down at the stairs, but other than that, have we seen them actually kill anybody?
Well, the very first time was when they were trying to find the limper back in chapter 2, and they found the blackened, charred, melted metal lumps of human beings in armor. Remember that?
Yeah, I think so.
It was, they were on their way into that town, but that was like they were killing everybody as they went. It was just powerful magic was destroying soldiers in the march.
Yeah.
Right. It was two armies going at each other, and we saw it indirectly. We didn't actually see them killing anybody, whereas now we've seen Soulcatcher do it.
Well, there was, outside of Lords,
we saw Soulcatcher steal souls.
That's killing them.
I agree, but sort of not.
Okay.
We're talking souls.
One of them may have died.
I'm just, the thing I'm saying is like Harden wasn't killed because of a member of the Taken.
He was killed by a human. Yeah. 2 humans chopped him to pieces.
Can they not kill humans?
No, I'm certain they can. I'm certain they can.
I'm sure. Of course. I'm being silly, but
Soulcatcher slaughtered all those Teamsters.
Oh, you're right. I'm being. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so here's the conundrum, though. If Soulcatcher wants to kill Croker at this point because he's a witness, right? But she can't for several reasons. One of the reasons is that he will be missed. Another reason is that the people that will miss him are not just the black company, but the lady will notice. But at the same time, if she doesn't kill him, what's to stop the lady from putting the eye on him and learning about the collusion? Let's assume that she wasn't even there, okay? Even though we suspect she was. They're screwed either way. If they kill him, they're screwed. If they don't kill him, they're screwed. Like, it's going to come out. So why did they let him die? Why was that more important? All they had to do was save his life. And they would have been able to sidestep this very damning problem that they have. Because either way they go, kill Croker or not, they're going to get the lady's attention.
Maybe they think they can control Croker.
He wrote it in the annals. They obviously can't.
Well,
right?
You're asking why they let him live. I'm only giving you an answer.
No, I know, but I'm telling you that's why that doesn't work. Your answer doesn't work because of that reason. He wrote it in the annals, and the lady can probably read his mind if she tries. The only thing that would stop her is if for some reason she decided she was going to gesture to him, no, I'm never going to put the eye on you again because I value you.
Maybe it's not that big a thing. The lady didn't have a problem when Limper was screwing things up because a lot of times it successfully helped the situation out, even though we weren't looking at the big picture. it could be the same thing. I mean, all right, you know, they have their little squabbles. I'll just take somebody else, you know.
I got the impression that Soulcatcher knew she was doing wrong by letting the Hangman die.
Yeah.
So I just want to simplify two possible scenarios. So the only two reasons I can think of that makes sense for why Soulcatcher would let Croaker live are, one, she's afraid to angry the lady because Croaker is her chosen. So she's afraid to basically kill him.
He's untouchable.
Or two, the lady has specifically orchestrated this in some way.
Okay.
Right?
I mean, I know what you're saying. I just don't see how she could have orchestrated Harden throwing the sword and hitting the Hanged Man in the head.
Oh, right. Fair enough. That was coincidental. Yes. No, so either she let Croaker live because the lady specifically gave orders to make sure he lives, or two, she's afraid, Soulcatcher's afraid of the lady. Repercussions.
Everybody should be afraid of the lady.
Yeah. So there you go. Those are my two simplified ideas.
Okay, so we're going to wind it down really pretty much right now. Do you guys have anything you want to put in?
No.
All right. Well, that does it for this chapter, Harden, Chapter 5 of The Black Company. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Science Fiction and Fantasy Read Along. Use the links available to follow or subscribe in order to get notifications when we go live or post new content. Keep reading, everyone, and we'll see you next time.